Hi, I'm Suki. Welcome to Getting Psychic, where you can listen to me use myself to test the theory that anyone can get psychic. Hello, welcome to Getting Psychic. I'm your host, Suki, and I'm doing it. I'm doing another solo episode. Can you handle it? Okay, so I figured that since February 24th, which was actually the day that I interviewed Lori Stahl, that was the 2-year podiversary. So I thought I would do some reflections. Yeah, 2 years ago on February 24th, Claire and I started recording. Although I don't believe that we launched an episode until like June of that year. We were just like recording every week and racking them up. And in the meantime, I think I started to learn how to edit them or something. Anyway, so wow, so much has changed in 2 years. It's almost unbelievable. It's also shocking if I dare go back and listen to the early episodes. It's hard for me not to like cringe to death. But, you know, that's all a part of the journey. And probably 2 years from now, I'll be listening to this and barfing. But, and so let's see, this is fun interviewing myself. Why do I cringe when I listen to those episodes? Okay, so there's sort of like this, like earnest franticness to my energy that is so foreign to me just 2 years later, and it makes me laugh. Like, there was something about the excitement and the interest in exploring the non-physical world that I was just, like, weirdly aggressive about, and I guess as my experience has unfolded in these realms, I've just become so much more, like, laid back about it. Everything just makes a little bit more sense, and then there's this element to it where it's like, "Oh, I don't really need everything to make sense." So, you know, maybe that's relatable. I don't know, but that's why I cringe. And so, what else do I wanna say? So, okay, there are multiple prongs to how things have changed for me so drastically. One one is healing related, and then the other side is the actually getting psychic part. Uh, it's kinda wild. I don't know if you have to have a podcast about it for 2 years, like, maybe that's the secret formula, but it's one way to do it, and it really worked. Sorry, I'm taking a moment to sip espresso. Alright, what should I talk about first? Should I talk about like, as if you can answer me, should I talk about the healing part or the getting psychic part? Okay, okay, got it. I'm gonna talk about the healing part, but please know that this is, like, all completely intertwined, and, like, a one nice side effect of doing this podcast and doing all of the exploring and researching and learning about chakras and looking at my chakras and having readings by all sorts of amazing people and just putting myself in the energy of exploration in the non-physical realms has just been super healing. So like many of us, I have a handful of those conditions that fall under the autoimmune umbrella. And I will speak only for myself when I say that I believe that those disturbances have energetic origins and implications. So, when I was around 22 years old, I started I remember I started calling my mom and saying that something was wrong with my brain. And I remember feeling like cloudy and sluggish all the time. And I was just slowly starting to feel like not myself anymore. And I moved to Chicago. I also experienced some extra stressors and traumas actually. And then I got to the point where I started to realize that like I was severely responding to consuming gluten. And I got to the point where I was so messed up that I remember saying I wasn't suicidal, but I didn't want to live. So I didn't really know how to navigate that. Like I was like, there's what what is the actual point in living if I'm completely compromised and I'm not myself? And what was happening ultimately, I discovered, was that when I ate gluten, I was reacting to, I mean, potentially the grain protein, but also probably the way that we manufacture grains here in America. Um, and it was making my cerebellum swell. Like it was causing a severe immediate inflammatory reaction. And I'm sure it was causing inflammation all over. But so what happened was that I was left in a prolonged state of basically lack of peripheral vision. And it's very hard to describe, but it was super freaking uncomfortable. Like I remember walking around with my hands cupped in circles around my eyes to create a tunnel because my muscles were not moving my eyes fast enough to have peripheral vision, basically. So it was like my eyes were drunk all the time in a weird way. Uh, and it felt horrible. And then I think one of my sisters pointed out, um, your aunt has gluten intolerance. Maybe you should look into that. Da, da, da. So um, I cut it out and finally started to feel better. And I was going to doctors. I had unnecessary like sinus surgeries, and I went through all sorts of shit. And I think this is common. I mean, this is like 20 years ago, but I think this is common. People having to like suffer through navigating this kind of mystery illness, and then just ultimately figuring it out themselves. So, I mean, positive things came from it. I developed like an appreciation for Eastern medicine and just like holistic health in general. But so, needless to say, I was strictly not eating gluten. And then it also became like a cliche, and like every TV show makes jokes about it. And socially, it fucking sucked, honestly. It was really hard to make that adjustment from being someone who comfortably ate everything and anything to someone who had restrictions. I felt like it made me seem weird, and it made me seem picky and all sorts of other nonsense. And like there were certain people that were assholes about it, to be honest. So it was kind of traumatic. Anyway, so all this to say that I strictly avoided gluten for over 20 years. And something happened a couple weeks ago where I thought that I should probably make this experiment with my body, knowing fully well that like I've years ago I had an instance where someone like opened a croissant near my coffee and the crumbs got in and I had a reaction. Like that's how sensitive I was. But I've been starting to feel over the past couple years like I haven't been reacting. Like I kind of stopped being concerned about cross contamination, which was a huge concern for me in the past, obviously, given the croissant incident and just, wanting to die. And so slowly over the past couple of years, I've been just like becoming more and more laid back and reintroducing all sorts of things that I was avoiding back into my diet because I started to look at things like the intellectual, the restriction and the outlook was more harmful than the food. And that's been going great. So my husband told me about this bakery here that mills their own grains. And based on the thought that maybe my reaction was coming from glyphosates or something that, is um, only an issue in certain parts of the world. Because, like, people are always saying, like, oh, I can't eat gluten in America, but I go to Paris and eat all the baguettes and I'm fine. So, based on that theory, I decided also, this has been 13 minutes about gluten. Lord. Okay. Almost done. So, anyway, I decide that I'm just going to do this experiment. So I go to this bakery that mills their own grains and I buy a giant chocolate croissant that is not gluten-free. And I eat it. And I'm fine. And to people who know me, that's kind of earth-shattering, right? Because this has been an unfortunate part of my identity for many, many years. And I attribute it to getting psychic. I mean, the podcast, not actually becoming psychic, which also happened. And just energetically healing. The other side to that, outside of the gluten intolerance, because these things always come in pairs, is that I also, after I had my first child, was diagnosed with Hashimoto's, which is an autoimmune thyroid condition. Super common in women. I read all the books. I did all the things. And so this is not medical advice. So don't do what I'm doing. I'm just sharing what's been going on with me. So I'm pretty determined to heal this as well. And I know there are a lot of people who will say that it's impossible, but I'll report back. So I take a thyroid medication that is like, it's actually basically pig thyroid. It's not synthetic. So my cycle is interesting because with the medication, it's like every October, I start to feel like I need to like lay on the ground. If anyone has Hashimoto's, you know that like you need to supplement your thyroid hormone with medication, or you can get super tired and your hair falls out and you gain weight and or potentially like all sorts of things can happen. But anyway, so one of my symptoms was if my dosage was too low, I would just one day find myself not really wanting to get up off the floor. And it was kind of like a cycle where I would text my friends in October, "Oh my gosh, I'm so tired." And then one of them would be like, I think we're supposed to remind you to like check your thyroid medication." And I'd be like, "Oh yeah." So I would like slightly up it and everything would be fine. And then come April, I would reduce it again because in the summer I felt like I was on speed. And that's just me. I don't know if everyone feels that way. So it's like a cycle. But guess what? This October, I did not find myself laying on the ground. In fact, it is now March and I did not raise my dosage. Therefore, come springtime, which in Chicago isn't like real until June, but whatever, I am going to lower my dosage for the summer. And then hopefully come October, I will not have to raise it again. And even if it takes me like 2 years to do this incrementally, I feel very confident that I can successfully do it. So, yes, getting psychic is healing, not to mention sort of all of the actual energy healing pursuits that I have explored because of it. As you know from the last episode, am super aligned with vibrational sound therapy, and I really think that is an important part of my path. So, to be continued, but this little adventure is actually healing my body. Okay, here's the other prong, if you're interested. So, the actually getting psychic part. As you know, I interviewed an animal communicator, Nikki Vascones, a few episodes ago. And on that episode, I took a risk and asked to talk to her dog, and then completely successfully talked to her dog. It was very clunky and awkward because it was live and it was the first time I had ever done it. But then I recorded another episode all about like the telepathic communications with animals expanding, and it has continued to. I started this class finally yesterday, which hopefully will just sort of like keep me in the energy of that practice and expand the communication. And okay, so here's the other element of it, which is not shocking, but very cool. And it's that because I tried animal communication and got validation, and because I started communicating with animals regularly with consistent validation, surprise, I trust the messages that I'm receiving more. And because I trust the messages I'm receiving more, I can now do it with humans. So it's not like I'm telepathically communicating with a person per se, but I am doing what all of the psychics that I've interviewed do, which is presumably connecting with their guides or their higher self, or, somebody who's out there giving me information. I'm sure that I will be able to refine that awareness as well. But so, like, I was experimenting the other day. I was like, okay, I was talking to my sister and I was like, let's talk to each other. Like, she has mediumship abilities. So she was like, we were both just experimenting. And I was like, okay, let me just do what I do to animals and ask for your guides. Like, I basically am like, hey, angels, archangels, light beings, ETs, dragons, uh, anyone with their highest and greatest good, come forth and give us information for our highest and greatest good. Like, I just ramble off a list of anybody who I can think of, because why not? And it really does help to open the door. I can talk about what connecting to your guides in a second. But so I call everybody in and I'm like, what does Elizabeth need to know right now? And I get all of this imagery and movement, just like when I'm communicating with an animal. And I get some stuff that seems like completely random to me, but I just share it with her. And let me remember. Okay, one thing was, oh, I saw a spine, like a human spine and a dragon. And I was like, what the heck? And I report this to her, and she says to me, oh my God, I just did this ceremony yesterday that it involved this implement. I can't remember what it was, like a drum building ceremony or something weird. But she did this thing, and it involved basically the base of it was a dragon head, and the the extension from it was supposed to represent a human spine. I had no idea. Who would have thought of that? That sounds fucking crazy. So, needless to say, her whoever I was communicating with wanted to relay the importance of that she did to her. You know, that will just continue to unfold. But I think my biggest thing is really just kind of knowing. And it's kind of annoying because sometimes it feels like, I mean, I know that the sort of frequency of when something gets dropped in my head, but it's kind of like cringy because sometimes if I say something, it's like, I don't want this to sound like advice because it's not advice, and I really don't know very many people who like receiving advice. And this is in my head. Like, for example, I was out to dinner with my friend in LA like a few weeks ago, and she was talking about a situation with work. And I suddenly just started rattling off all of this stuff. And it was absolutely not coming from my thinking brain. And then I also suddenly was talking about another person in the scenario that she had brought up. And I was addressing a certain element of it. I'm clearly trying to be super vague, but to make the point that I physically felt how this person felt when my friend communicated in a certain way. And I was able to relay that to her like, "Oh my gosh, this makes this person feel like this." And it was exactly like when an animal shows me that they're sad or something to that effect. So, I do feel like the biggest thing for me is just like when the back of my head opens up and stuff gets placed in there, but that one's kind of the trickiest because it's like hard to know what to take responsibility for, but you know, uh sort of learning not to make a big deal about it and not really being too attached to where it's coming from or how it might seem. I mean, basically, you can pick and choose when you feel comfortable or safe presenting things when they come up like that. There's absolutely no reason why you should feel obligated to walk around uh, blasting out your downloads because that's like seems obnoxious. So apparently we have to exercise discretion in all realms. But yeah, so healing physically, yes. Wow, so much. Developing psychically, yes. And I'm still just technically a normal human being, but kind of like much more laid back when it comes to this stuff, which is a very funny side effect. Like, I mean, I still have like a great curiosity and a huge desire to laugh about all of this, but I feel like I'm just not so aggressively curious. Like some things can be left unknown. Also, you know, if you're here on Earth, I just want to say that I'm proud of you and you should be super proud of yourself because it's hard and weird. And we signed up to come here and deal, learn, and navigate some lower frequency lessons, like in terms of sort of other places in the universe where we could have incarnated. All I hear over and over again is this is just the hardest. And so I just want you just to remind you, here's your daily reminder that you chose to do a really hard thing. And you should be proud of yourself. And I'm sure you're learning a lot here. Like, even if you're lucky enough to have a positive outlook and have your basic survival needs met, it's just freaking weird and hard and complicated and nuanced. I have been reading Eckhart Tolle, A New Earth again. I've talked about this before, but how much a role your thinking brain plays in your problems in daily life. Like I'm pretty convinced that for most of us, it's responsible for most of our problems. It's like we think of the intelligent human mind as the peak of evolution, but really it's just kind of like a step in evolution and it is not the final destination by any means. Because like think about that constant chatter that you have walking around with you all day and sometimes all night. Like what would it be like if you didn't have that? And he kind of points out that the piece of us that is able to stop and observe that chatter, that's really us. The chatter is really just our ego, and it doesn't exactly need to be there, or at least we don't have to identify with it. It is just a symptom of where we are in our evolution. So, wait, I'll read this. Page 59, Chapter 3, The Core of Ego. Most people are so completely identified with the voice in their head, the incessant stream of involuntary and compulsive thinking, and the emotions that accompany it, that we may describe them as being possessed by their mind. As long as you are completely unaware of this, you take the thinker to be who you are. This is the egoic mind. We call it egoic because there is a sense of self, of I, ego, in every thought, every memory, every interpretation, opinion, viewpoint, reaction, emotion. This is unconsciousness, spiritually speaking. Your thinking, the content of your mind, is of course conditioned by the past, your upbringing, culture, family background, and so on. The central core of all your mind activity consists of certain repetitive and persistent thoughts, emotions, and reactive patterns that you identify with most strongly. This entity is the ego itself. Okay, it's so funny how, you know, we use our interests and our likes and our dislikes, especially, to create who we are. And I was thinking about that earlier and I was like, oh, it kind of fucking sucks. And even if you're the most kind, generous person, we all sort of do it. And I realized that, like, I just secretly or internally judge people or situations way more than I would even like to admit. It's just sort of like a programmed part of how humans function. But it's like we're all trying to be separate, and we're all trying to be unique, and we're all trying to self identify. I hate Steely Dan, or like whatever. But then I was thinking, like, okay, but what would a world without human ego and its messaging actually be? And my next realization was sort of like, oh, well, it would be like some sort of like higher ET race, because they communicate and align using frequency. It's like you sort of know where you belong or who you want to hang out with because of frequency, not because they love this one Bill Withers song and so do you. I mean, I don't know, maybe there's some of that, but yeah, it's just like so deeply a part of us that I'm trying to figure out how to even start to peel myself out of that. But the first way is to spend more time observing the thinking. I laugh at my thinking all the time. I mean, maybe that's a coping mechanism, but I prefer to laugh at what I catch myself thinking than to, like, anything else. It makes me think about this mantra, actually, that my friend Vera, who has been on this podcast, I believe this was channeled in a meditation, or when she was like opening up the Akasha. But anyway, so it's called the heart-centered mantra of 3. Heart-centered thoughts, heart-centered words, heart-centered actions, all day, every day. It's very simple, but it's also very poignant and big. And the first time I heard it, I was very drawn to it. Like, I think I was like, can I make that my email signature? And I think most people have a similar reaction, because you realize once you take all of that chatter out from your brain and put more energy into the heart center, that's where magic starts to happen. If you look at people through your heart center, if you I mean, it's actually the way I've figured out that, like, telepathic communication is going deep into my heart center and then projecting out from there. It's I'm not using my brain. So, I mean, it's all visualization and intention, but I think the heart center, the energy center of the heart, is super important. And if we can utilize it in our daily life in any way we can think of, it's healing. Probably healing for those around us too, because we're not going to be judging them for, wearing flip flops, or, whatever one might judge someone for. So, anyway, when I move through life through the heart energy center and not my thinker, it's just way cooler. And I think that's the gist of my 2-year recap. It has been a beautiful journey. And I know that Claire signed up to start it with me. And I would have absolutely never done it without her. Even though when I talk to her, she's like, it's your podcast, honey. I'm like, oh, come on, dude. There's not a chance in the world that I would have ever not, I don't mean this in like insecure way at all, but I would have never been bold enough to think that I should have something to say that people would want to hear. And so it needed to happen in a way that was a partnership for me to be able to come on and talk for, 45 minutes by myself eventually. And it's not because I'm think that I'm so profound that this is going to change your life, but it's because I realize that there is space. I could have used this voice. There is space for the voice of someone who is actively going through a process and sharing openly right in it, during it. And you know how much I like detail, so I know that there are probably other people out there who appreciate that I'm bothering to do this. Because coming on here and having something to say doesn't mean that I have to think that I am an authority. But I know that I am a perspective. And that's all that I need to be. And I like to have fun. So, I mean, come on. What's not to like? Oh, okay. So on Friday, I'm going to be interviewing America's sweetheart, Megan Solarglow, aka the Dowsing Rod Girl, which I am very excited about. If you are somehow familiar with this podcast and not familiar with her social media accounts, go find her. I think she's pretty gutsy. And you'll learn a lot about her within the next 2 weeks, and I can't wait. I think it's going to be really fun. And then after that, I have Debbie Solaris coming on. Debbie is a galactic historian, Akashic channeler, intuitive, and ET contactee. She helps others identify their star origins and soul purpose, and it's going to be super fun. Yeah, I think that's going to be a good one. I had her on a panel discussion when I went to that Conscious Life Expo. That was crazy. The room was completely full, and I looked up and I was like, what have I gotten myself into? But I guess that is another plug for following your excitement, because, the only thing that we technically do know is that we're going to die, and you may as well make this a weird adventure to the best of your ability. But I'm here to support you for that. And I really appreciate you all for listening. The end. Heart-centered thoughts, heart-centered words, heart-centered actions, all day, every day. Thanks so much for listening. We hope you enjoyed today's conversation as much as we did. Be sure to subscribe and follow us wherever you get your podcasts so that you never miss a new episode. If you liked today's episode, please consider leaving a review to help the other psychics find their way here.